Joining me now, Rebecca Roiphe, former Manhattan Assistant District Attorney and current professor at New York Law School. Interesting language there. One of your scholarly articles was cited in the acting Manhattan U.S. Attorney's lengthy resignation letter, which seems to speak directly to the sound that we just played. She argued dismissing the case with the option of indicting Adams again in the future creates obvious ethical problems if Adams' cooperation is, quote, unsatisfactory. Adams claims he did not trade his authority as mayor in exchange for ending his case. But when you listen to that clip, is a threat being delivered?
You know, it certainly looks that way. There is the appearance that there is this dismissal with leverage, essentially, that what the Department of Justice is doing is holding over his head the possibility of being recharged with these crimes to make him do what they want him to do. But you know what? Even if that is not the case, it is inappropriate to either bring or dismiss charges in order to affect some kind of public policy consequence. And here, even if what they're doing is just trying to free him up because he's doing what they wanted to do anyway, that's also an inappropriate use of the criminal laws. So either way, that is not the way prosecutors have been trained to use their power. And that's why we see so many resignations, because this is an inappropriate partisan consideration to being injected into a decision that ought to be about the impartial application of the laws.
Well, in fact, the lead prosecutor in Adams' case had a stark comment in his resignation letter. Hagan Scotton said that laws and traditions don't permit the dismissal, and added, if no lawyer within earshot of the president is willing to give him that advice, then I expect you will eventually find someone who is enough of a fool or enough of a coward to file your motion. But it was never going to be me. In this moment, Rebecca, how important are the courts in standing up to Trump, and what does it mean if the DOJ is doing his bidding?
I think, it's really important to have these courageous prosecutors standing up for the rule of law right now. The court has very little discretion at this point. I think there's some unsettled law about whether or not the court can even resist the dismissal when the defendant has signed on to this and wants it to happen. And so we're going to see that play out in the courts, and perhaps the courts are an additional check here, but that is not at all clear. So these prosecutors who are sending a message that this is what is happening to the Department of Justice under the current administration are extremely important right now, because they are whistleblowers sending a call to the public that, this is extremely concerning.
Let's play this out. If Adams loses his job, does that have any impact on his legal trouble? Does it make it more likely new or the same charges could be brought sooner? And could he face New York State charges too?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. So the Department of Justice gave essentially two reasons for their order to dismiss this case. The first one was, as we were saying, to free him up so that he can implement their policy objectives of criminal law enforcement, and especially with regard to immigration policy. But the other one, initially, what Emil Bovy said was that this was potentially politically motivated. Then later on, after Danielle Sassoon gave her resignation letter, he doubled down and he said this was a weaponized use of the criminal justice system. He said that without any proof or evidence. But once he said that, it would be very hard for him to bring new charges, even if Eric Adams is no longer mayor. So I think, the possibility that these charges are going to come back is pretty slim. Of course, it is true that the Manhattan District Attorney's Office could step in here and might do so. We've seen that, Alvin Bragg has been willing to serve as a backstop when there, is some issue with regard to federal law enforcement, either the laws that are available to federal prosecutors or what's going on in federal prosecution, that he might indeed step in.
Big picture here, because former prosecutors and other experts say that Trump's actions could open the floodgates to corruption. That includes by foreign actors. Can you explain the stakes of removing these guardrails?
Absolutely. So, essentially what all these guardrails do is they prevent against a system that's kind of like the spoils system, which is what was there before we had career prosecutors. There were, prosecutors that were essentially in the pocket of politicians, and they would do what politicians wanted, which meant essentially that politicians controlled this huge, vast power to deprive people of liberty. And they could threaten that as well in order to make any actor do what they wanted to do. So there is the possibility that we go back to a world in which that's the case, essentially the world of mob bosses, where political party bosses, where they control all sorts of powerful actors by holding over their head the possibility of investigation, prosecution, criminal charges. And that's a world in which we don't have equal justice anymore under the law, and liberty is at stake. And of course, when people's liberty is at stake, they're incredibly likely to do somebody's bidding. And so it's a real corruption, a real fear of corruption. Defendants down across the board might now claim this is a Department of Justice that has been compromised, and therefore the respect for the rule of law, even in kind of run-of-the-mill cases, is compromised.
Does that mean you're not surprised that more than 7 did not resign in the offices as a result of this?
I think probably what happened was a calculated decision that they would be worse off if all of them left. In other words, isn't it good to have some experienced and ethical prosecutors remain in that office at this moment? Because if they all leave, then, all of these offices would be filled with somebody who, doesn't have their training and perhaps doesn't have their ethical compass. And so I think probably what ended up happening was a choice between two evils, and this is the one that was chosen.